Welcome to Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Taking the Next Steps in Leadership. I'm Dr. Stephen Oliver, or known as Dr. O. Very glad to have you in this podcast. The purpose of the podcast is to talk about leadership and taking the next step. This podcast is designed for newer managers, leaders, and mid level managers and leaders. But actually, anyone who wants to take that next step in their career and life can benefit from this. What I do is I invite senior level executives, I invite human resource professionals, learning leaders, business owners, nursing leaders, and other types of leaders to talk about the successes in their career and to impart some tips and techniques for leadership. So, with that in mind, I'd like to introduce today's guest speaker. This is Maxine Johnson. She is an author, co author, and life coach. And what she does is she works with women to help them to be their best selves and to take their lives to the next level. She is the CEO and founder of Wife Boss, which is a academy where she helps professional women who are unfulfilled in their careers and realize there is a purpose beyond their profession. She's encouraging and inspiring. Maxine also is a TED Talk speaker, and she does a lot of other things. She has written a book called The Five Critical Components for Creating Global Communities of Change. And she also is a human resource professional with over 20 years experience. And then she works with some faith-based organizations. She's going to talk a little bit about having some change in your life and trying to um, ready your life for that next level. So, with that in mind, welcome, Maxine. We're really glad to have you. Well, hello and welcome everybody to my podcast. As the introduction said, I'm Dr. Stephen Oliver, or Dr. O, and welcome to Next Steps to Leadership. The purpose of the podcast is to help those reviewing consider a next step in leadership. Where is your next step? Where you're going? I have invited to my podcast executives, consultants, professionals, professors to come in and tell a little bit about their life's journey, their career journey, and some of the steps that they've taken to step up. And this podcast is really designed for newer or mid level managers so they can look at their next steps. But this can be for anybody in any phase of your career in taking that next step.
Mhm.
So, welcome to all. Really glad to have you. So, welcome, Max. How are you doing? How's it going today?
I am doing well. It's going well. I have good morning, great morning, and good day to everyone. So thank you for having me, Dr. O.
Really glad to have you. So I wanted to know, Max, first and foremost, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what are you doing these days? I know that's pretty broad and big because you do a lot of things, but just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the biggest things, as you mentioned, finally decided to go back to school. So I am going into year two of my doctoral program, and it's going well. And the closer you get to working towards the dissertation, the more anxious I get. But I say I'm too far out in the water and the ships have burned, so it's no turning back now. So that has been mostly what I've been doing. I have been I still work 9 to 5, and I'm a senior HR manager, and I have not been doing as much coaching externally, but I have been coaching leaders in the organization. So I have been doing that, which has been still keeping me up with my coaching skills, and so I do like that to get even leaders to think more broadly about getting them to that next step or reaching the goals that they have set forth for themselves and for their departments or divisions. The other thing that I'm doing is I do some speaking outside of speaking. I've done workshops and speaking engagements, so I still do that, which I find fun and fulfilling. And as you know, and for the audience, I'm in ministry, so I'm a pastor of a church, and I pastor a church in Dover, Delaware, called John Wesley AME Church. So yeah, I have nothing going on.
You are extremely busy, and all those components of your life are
Yes.
exciting. It sounds like they all connect. I mean, you will eventually land on the dissertation topic, and that's going to be a lot of fun going
Mhm.
deep into it. I'm here to help, and it's very exciting that you're coaching externally and internally within the organization, and I'm confident in your ministry that there's coaching there as well. So it's really fantastic that you have all of these components together. Very, very exciting. I wanted to ask you, Max, how did you get into coaching and supporting professional women who, may not have fulfilled or realized where they are in their career right now? And, you know, I mean, I love what you said when we talked about this podcast. It's about their careers, but then going beyond their profession. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this.
I will say I got into it from another coach. So I always believe in investing in yourself. And a part of my investment was investing in a coach for myself. But at the time, I was investing in me broadening speaking opportunities outside of faith-based organizations.
Mhm,
And what I mean by that, I'm not talking about just preaching from the pulpit, but it was more so of doing women's conferences within the churches, which I was doing speaking in those for many, many years. But how do I get outside of that? Because the core of me, my background and what I do over 20 years in HR and human resources, that's my jam and I like it. I really like what I do. So from that coach, she asked me, "Have you ever considered coaching?" And I will say at the time, I'm like, Absolutely not. I don't have the skills. I don't, I'm just, it was, I think I was, um, what do they call it? I think, I had this imposter syndrome, like, that's
right,
outside.
mhm,
I don't have the skill, I'm not certified, I'm not
mhm,
this, and I was making all of these excuses, and my coach at the time, who was also a doctor, Dr. Sonia Stribling, I'll give her a shout out, she said to me, "You've been coaching all your life." And I'm like,
right,
"I haven't." She was like, "You're in ministry, you've been coaching. Let's,"
right.
and even be and I'm like, Oh, yeah, actually, okay." So that was the light bulb moment that had for me to say, "Okay, I can do this." Because as you know, Dr. O, in HR, you do coach. When you're
Mhm,
talking to leaders and when you're getting them from point A to point B, you're coaching. When you're talking to employees, you get them from point A to point B, you're coaching. When you have a
right,
team and you are moving them along or furthering their careers or whatever that looks like, you're coaching. But the light bulb did not go off for me until that time. So
mhm,
that's how I got into it, just started building that at the time, and how I got to coaching women who are professionals, because a lot of times it's like who's your avatar? Who
mhm,
who who do you connect with? What does that look like? And mostly I was pretty much hesitant because I didn't know. So I was trying to feel my way. But what I realized, all of the coachees or the women that I've coached over the numerous years, they all had the same thing in common.
mhm,
They were seasoned professionals. They said, I like what I do, but I know there's more, and I want to be able to move into another area. How do I do that? I just don't know."
mhm,
So that's when I found out, you know what? A lot of women, or I won't just put it on women and gender based, but this has been
mhm,
my experience, that a lot of them all were feeling, I know there's more to this. I know I'm skilled to this, but how can I utilize that so I can feel fulfilled? So I can say, you know what? I left this earth with a great legacy that I gave everything that I got. And so all of them had the same thing, including myself. I had to work through that. So by giving back is what fulfills me. So that's how I got into it.
That's so wonderful. This is almost like a testimonial. I so appreciate that. And you're right, being in human resources, I've been in, and we're coaching people, even
Mhm.
applicants, coaching people for that next step. I love what you're saying, point A to point B.
Mhm.
And maybe that leads to C and D, but that's really powerful. And then another really powerful thing that you said, Max, is this imposter syndrome. That seems to be a buzzword today.
Yeah.
People who are doing well, but don't feel that. They don't feel that like they're doing well.
Mhm.
Um, and both men and women can have that. Very
Yeah.
successful people can have
Yes.
that syndrome or feeling.
Yes.
So that's really great that you are focusing on women. Um, what might be some strategies or methods that you motivate, encourage women in their lives and their journey? Maybe even in your coaching sessions.
Sure. One thing I like to do is I always like to ask, and I will say this because if one of my coachees, I have coached men, so I will say that because if he sees this, when he sees this, he's going to say, "Wait, you did coach me," and I'm telling everybody you're my coach. So
Right.
So I'll just say the majority of my
Great.
clients have been women. So to go back to your question, to answer your question, one of the things that I do that I know that has been very powerful is celebrating wins, celebrating
Mhm. Yes.
accomplishments. And a lot of times, what I found is the coachees there. I'm like, tell me what you're proud of that you've done, that you've accomplished this past week. And Dr. O, that was really a challenge for people to
Mhm.
answer. And they're thinking to themselves, well, wait a minute, what did I do? What did I do well? What are you proud of? What is a win? And so, even if a win is I'm showing up here, I had a rough day, but I'm showing up because I want to invest in myself, then we celebrate that. That's where the motivation comes in. However, I do realize that it's not always about motivation because some people sometimes you just don't you're not motivated. So how do we take that to the next level? So one, I celebrate wins. The second thing that I do is we want to talk about what is your purpose? What is your North Star? What keeps you going? Why are you doing this?
Mhm.
Why? What is the end goal? Whether it's goals, whether it's purpose, whether it's North Star, whatever you insert here, always reminding them, "This is why you keep showing up. This is why you're here." So that overtakes motivation, but replaces it with dedication. So those are some of the things that I've done, to keep women engaged or coachees engaged
Mhm.
into the work.
I love that, short wins. Sometimes we don't even realize we have a short win. And
Mhm.
I forget who the famous person who said that. Just showing up is half the battle.
Yes.
you know, each
Yeah.
day, just getting up, getting out of bed, and getting there is great. But
Yes.
we don't. A lot of times we don't see those short wins, and that's great. And then that's very powerful. Your North Star, your purpose. Um, and if you're not sure what it is, I think you can help people to do
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely.
Very exciting. Do you have any success stories? A person or several where you saw a real success in them in your coaching and in your mentoring of them?
Yes. What brings to mind, I have a couple. One that brings to mind, I met this woman. She was out of Texas at the time, and her goal was to get back into education in her hometown, but she just didn't know how to get there. What was she doing? Because at that time, the educational system that she was in, her principal, I can't remember, but it was her leader that said that she should leave education.
Mm.
But she was really she felt defeated. Imposter syndrome was another, and she was discouraged. But she said, "This is in my heart. I know I can do more, and I know I want to go back to." She was from North Carolina, so we talked through what were the things that really drove her to education, and she talked about her story. She doesn't have children. She has a fur baby, that's her child, and because she and unfortunately she couldn't have children, and so she wanted to give back to other children, and she knew she was good. And I asked, well, what makes you good? How do you know that you're good? And she started sharing that, so we just started writing those things down. What she did was she moved back home to where she was from, North Carolina, got a teaching gig,
Mhm.
and working towards her goal of having a her own, because she had a tutoring business, because again, she was told, "You're not a good teacher," so she reverted to tutoring, but she said, "No, I know I belong in a classroom." So she's back, still in North Carolina. We keep in touch on social media, and she's still teaching and she's doing what she loved. But sometimes we, instead of encouraging and empowering as leaders, when you talk about leaders stepping up, there's a difference between telling somebody what they can't do or how can we move them to do what they do better, because there's always a thing about will and skill. And it's a difference. If someone's not willing to do it, then they don't belong there.
Mhm.
If there's a skill as a leader, it's a part of what we do to skill them up to get the job done. And if we're not, then that's on us as leaders. And I know I'm going off the rail, but
Mhm.
it was
No, that's great. Yeah.
it's something I had this conversation with other leaders. If I'm sitting there, if I'm having a conversation with someone or have someone on my team or someone that we're colleagues and they're not getting to the next level, whatever that can be, then I have to look at myself. I have to
Mhm.
look at myself, because I'm like, what am I not doing to get this person to their next level, whatever that may be?
Mhm.
Whether they said, no, I'm good, if they say, no, I'm good and I'm comfortable where I am, but how can I tap into that knowledge? How can I tap into that to take some things off of my plate as a leader
Mhm.
to say, hey, how about you take on this project? Not me, them, because it keeps them engaged. But then when you have someone that's in because I've been there, been in an entry level position, and you just move up because you're skilling up, you're skilling up, you're skilling up. So that's leaders behind your leaders make other leaders. It's no reason why. I say to people who report to me, you can't be in this position for the rest of your life. If you are, that's on me. You can't. You just can't.
Well, that's really powerful in respect to, does the person have the skill, but do they have the will? And
Mhm.
some just don't have the will to move up. With this leads into the next question.
Mhm.
You shared a success of this woman who went back to North Carolina and invested in her passion of education.
Mhm.
Have you some challenges with some women who maybe, even though you're coaching them, they're not wanting to go to that next step, or they've got some kind of a roadblock in front of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, one of the things that I've done, that I do before I take on someone as a client is I do an intake, as you know, just to see what's going on, what are their goals. And a lot of time that conversation can be a half hour, it can be 45 minutes just to talk that through and to see if they are a client, because everyone is not coachable.
Mhm. Right.
And so most of those clients, or I'll say prospective clients, have not been coachable because during the conversations, you realize that there is something else that's beyond coaching. Meaning, and to be honest, meaning that that person may need therapy, that person may need additional help. So they may need a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm just, it's a beyond my scope. And how do I know that? Because I don't know. It's just, I guess, discernment. But at
Mhm.
the same, you just know coaching is not going to get you through if you keep talking about your ex-husband. This is not,
Right.
this isn't the relationship you need right now.
Mhm.
Go through that grief, go through whatever you're dealing with. Like if you're dealing with, I had it. And then I'm just thinking about what happened real life. Dealing with divorce, dealing with that, they were really going through. Oh, yeah, I've been through divorce myself, happily married now, but
Mhm.
been through divorce. I understand that, but you gotta go through that it's like a grieving process.
Right.
Coaching may not help that, especially if you keep inserting that. You have to go through that. So those have been some areas or an example of, I'll say it may not have been successful, but I'll say not so much as unsuccessful, but just a matter of this wasn't the fit. You needed to go get other help.
Yes, that's very insightful. And it sounds like you are honest with the coachee or the prospective coachee.
Mhm.
Say that to them. And it's not being insulting, but it's just something that they need to work through. Do you have any clients who are resistant to change? Because change is huge.
Absolutely, mostly all of them have been resistant
Right.
to
Maybe all of us.
and I'm included because it
Right.
doesn't
Yes.
feel it's not comfortable. It does not feel comfortable. Um, and I've had one client in particular who would tell me, "I don't like change."
Hmm.
And then, I mean, sometimes you have to have a hard conversation. Okay, you don't like change, but what is it that what's the goal? And sometimes it even got harder. Why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you investing in yourself?
Right.
If you don't, you got to make change. Nothing happens if nothing happens. Nothing changes if nothing changes. You got it. So, and it's just moving them along. And I'll say sometimes it's a push, sometimes it's a pull. But when it's a push, it's just saying that I got your back. I'm here with you for the journey. But the pulling sometimes gets tiresome. But after a while, people don't wanna be pulled anymore. They either go so there have been times when you had to pull a little bit until they were able to say, "Okay, I just need you to have my back to push me along and push me to the next step."
Yes. Well, thanks for sharing that, the push and pull. And it's different for everyone, but
Yes.
change is challenging. So Max, you have a I believe it's a book. It was a guideline, but I believe it's a book. The five critical components for creating global communities of change. Would you like to share that with us? Tell us what it's about, and then how can this apply to your clients?
Sure. So the 5 critical components to creating global communities of change pretty much was, I'll say, birth out of, my own story and how I've grown and developed, if you will, from, different experiences. And that's where those 5 critical components and the book's title is called Helping a Sister.
Hmm.
And the critical components I talk about is around see, share, care, change, and create. And it's simple, and it's created simple. It's a quick and easy read. But the idea is that through every experience that we go through, there's something that we can learn from it. Like, for example, when I talk about seeing, it was certain things I had to see about myself. I had to see differently in others. It's all around perspective. When I talk about sharing, meaning sharing thoughts, experiences, because a lot of times we believe that we're going through things by ourselves. That's not true. So, like, that's why mentorship is important. The sponsorship is important. Coaches are important. Accountability partners are important because you're able to share experiences to encourage, inspire, motivate, and to remind folks that you've dedicated yourself to that change. And so those are just some thoughts that I had, but its premise is around what I've learned about my own experiences.
Well, that's really powerful, and you can connect that to your coaching
Yes.
and also to your speaking. That was my next question. So,
Mhm.
a while back, you contacted me about any insights I had about the Society for Human Resource Management, since I've done some
Yeah.
teaching with them. You had a TED talk in the Society for Human Resource Management in Ohio, I believe.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, and then just some of your speaking engagements.
Sure. I had a good so the Ohio Sherm was a great experience, and I was able to do a talk around employee relations,
Hmm.
and the title was "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly,"
Excellent.
because that's what employee relations is. It's not all when we think about employee relations for those HR professionals, sometimes we think about, okay, policies, procedures, firing. If I make it simple there, I'll say I'm on the kind of the policy side. I used to say the firing side. But the whole idea is employee relations could be positive. It could have a positive connotation. It just depends on how we lead and how we manage. So I was able to do that and have a talk there, and two actually on the same topic. It was well attended, had made some connections
Mhm.
there, and so I really love that. Looking forward to doing more. Um, and then with the TED Talk, it's always good to connect with people and network, because I was able to land the TED Talk through a friend of a friend. It was like, Maxine, we have this TED Talk. But what I did do that people don't know is, or may not know, I'll just say that, is doing a TEDx or a TED Talk is different from just going up and speaking on a topic. At a conference, it's more so around, like you said, being a thought leader and what your thoughts around that. And I didn't I was grappling with that. So I did invest in a coach who helped me with
Mhm.
that process, who's done several TEDx, and he had coached me along and helped me through the process, which was very powerful. The other thing about the TEDx that made it a little bit different was it was during COVID. It was virtual, which they still may have some virtuals, but it was virtual. It was, I think it was the TEDx Almister Park out of California. It was virtual. So I had to find a location, and had to find a production team to record it. And this is where I always say networking and getting to know people is good. I hired a friend of mine who Chisholm Group at the time, Maurice Chisholm and his team of his wife and friend, and they all came together to help me with the production. And so it all worked out, and so that was a great experience, different for me. Um, and I always tell people, if you've never done a TEDx, it's always good to either invest in someone that's done that, because if you start, I will say, preaching your ideas or
Right.
whatever, they're they're like, "Nope, this is not gonna work." So, I had someone help me with my proposal, help me with all of
Mhm.
that, but, I was just really grateful for that opportunity, and so the title of the TEDx is, "Heroes Need Help Too," and so, I was really, grateful for that opportunity.
Well, I'm so impressed and being honored speaking to a TED Talk person. That's
Thank
great.
you.
I would just add one thing. Whenever I speak, I run through my presentation like 5 to 10 times, just so I don't stumble.
Right.
But sounds like you did a lot of preparation and got
Yes.
assistance and guidance, and
Yes.
that's um, a great thing to let people know when they're preparing, to just really
Mhm.
prepare before you speak.
Absolutely.
That's exciting. Um, So, just if you don't mind, say a little bit more about your doctoral degree. What led you to deciding to go to a doctoral degree? You have other degrees, and what are you thinking about your research as head into that journey? As you said, you're already out in the water, and there may not even. I'll throw you a life preserver, but you're out in that water. What's left?
I'm sorry. So my doctoral degree is a doctorate in business administration with a concentration in organizational leadership. Um, I am fascinated by leadership, and particularly around women in leadership. I am a student at National University, which I started at North Central University, but they've merged with National University. So it's now
Okay.
National University. I've been in, I think I'm going it's been, going on a year and a half now. Yes, about a year and a half, and I'm probably about another year and a half to go, or
Right.
or 2. Something like that. But, one thing that and you and I talked about this, Dr. O, is being a woman in leadership and faith-based.
Hmm.
Coaching women who are, I'll say, individual contributors, but leaders. I think, leadership is not associated with the title. And then having background in HR, just all of that coming together. my thoughts around leadership is around women in leadership and looking at that. So there's a point that a connection that I want to tie in around that. One of my, as I mentioned, one of my former coaches always talks about being one of the only females at um, at the tables when you're talking amongst millionaires. So I want to get understanding what that feels like, what that looks like, and so it's more so around that. So and especially perhaps around African American women in leadership and talking about their experiences. So that's where I'm kind of floating towards, but I know I gotta dial it down even more. I do. And so that's the overarching umbrella, but I'll make it very specific to what
Mhm.
that looks like.
Think you're on the right path. It sounds like there's a dissertation right there in your words, and I'm so proud of you. And
Thank
I
you.
would say to everyone in taking a next step, don't be afraid to go back to school, whatever it is, whether it's a formalized degree or if it's something, a certificate, or even something that's more creative. Don't be afraid to do that, and that can help you in that next step. So
Absolutely.
really, really admire you for doing that and going back. And we're
Thank
going to
you.
meet soon to help talk about that. So I'm happy to really assist if I can.
Thank you.
So, in winding down, a couple more questions. You mentioned this earlier at the beginning of our discussion about being 20 years in human resources and 12 years in your faith-based service. How do these experience help you in coaching? You did say some things earlier, but just again, how do both of these parts
Mhm,
of your life and career
mhm.
help you as you're coaching women and also men?
Yeah. That's a great question. I one thing, and I'll give my husband credit. He said, "Stop trying to separate it. It's as he's always, you would say it's transferable." So
Yeah.
once I kind of merged it to say the leadership looks, it's the same on, it could be the same on both sides. Meaning, a lot of times, um, in seminary, they don't teach you around the leadership administrative part, but in
Mhm.
HR, I got that part.
Yeah.
In HR, they believe faith-based, all you're doing is preaching and you just, you bless people and you give them communion, that's it. But
Mhm.
there's another side to it. So there is an overlap. So what I've done is pretty much merge and say what are the transferable skills that helps in each aspect. So for example, I met with one of our senior officers actually on yesterday, and we just talked about some things on how to move the church to the next level. How do
Mhm.
we get there? Ooh, HR, that's change
Oh,
management. Once we
yeah.
once we get that, understanding of what the goals are and we outline them and what those metrics will look like, that's change management. Oh, that's fine, no problem. On the other end, even if we're talking about conflict resolution or something within HR that you may have to deal with, or you have to kind of give someone some feedback that's hard, it's that pastoral heart that comes into play without slapping somebody with a Bible or something like that,
Mhm.
right? But the
Right.
whole idea is having a demeanor, having, I'll say a tone that is more welcoming, opposed to I'm telling you this so that you are offended. I don't want to offend anyone. I want to be supportive because that's what I would do on a faith-based side.
Mhm.
So it has helped me on the side of HR. It's even when you're insulted. I've been insulted on both sides. I've been insulted, you know, we are human. I've been insulted on the faith-based side where people have said things to me that's pretty offensive, and you have to hold your peace. But you can still give that feedback that they realize, okay, I apologize, but it's not mean, it's not offensive. Same thing on the other side. Someone could be offended or say something offensive or be mean or rude. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be mean or rude. What it does mean is I'm going to pause, give you the feedback, and let's move on. So I've just utilized transferable skills on both ends.
Well, you're truly leading by example in what you said.
Thank
And
you.
I think a lot of people don't realize they think a church or a synagogue or a temple is just a place for spirituality and prayer. But I mean, they're businesses
Right.
and there's conflict there too.
Exactly.
We're dealing with human beings. And it
Exactly.
sounds like you really have well utilized both your human resources administrative skills and your faith-based skills. So I
Thank you.
commend you for that. And the doctoral degree will help you even more with all of that.
Thanks.
So, last question, Maxine, is are there any final suggestions or recommendations about encouraging and inspiring women and men to be their best selves? Any final things in taking that next step in leadership?
Yeah. I think the one thing I will always share with people, I have a couple of mantras. One of my biggest mantras is you're always interviewing.
Mhm.
And so meaning you show your best selves all the time when you're meeting with people, no matter what level they're on, you're showing your best selves because you never know of the connection. I mean, look at us. We've been connected for over 20 years.
Right.
And it's been because I love talking to you. We have great
Mhm.
conversations. We sharpen each other. I've learned from you. And over the course of years, and I will say you've been a part of inspiring me to go back to get my doctorate degree because it was always that little
Right.
something in the back of my head, like, oh, I got to do this, you know? And so it was time and the time happened and I'm in it. I will also share that so you're always interviewing is first and foremost. The other thing is that the research shows that the best leaders are lifelong learners. And you mentioned that earlier, and I will just echo what you've said. Always looking to learn. Like this, as
Mhm.
you see the back of me, this is just a little bit of the books I
Right.
have. I have a lot more, but I just don't have time to read them yet because of, you're reading articles and journals during school. So that's the other thing, always learning. And you can learn from anyone. I'm
Mhm.
just having an attitude of curiosity or that's always helped. So if I'm asking, it may not be that I just want to learn from you. I just want to
Right.
understand where that's coming from. So that just awakens me or gives me a different perspective. And then the last thing I'll share with anyone, with leaders,
Mhm.
just do it afraid. Just go ahead and just do it. You don't know if you can swim unless you get in the water. So at least get in the water and get wet and just do it. Just do it afraid.
Well, really wonderfully said, Max. You also inspire me, motivate me. It's been such an honor connecting with you, staying in touch, and I look forward to continuing doing that and learning more about your as you solidify, crystallize your doctoral dissertation and your questions. And it's just great to be connected with you. Great energy. So I'd like to just thank Reverend, soon to be Dr. Reverend Maxine
Mhm.
L. Johnson. Thank you so much for coming to the
Thank
podcast
you.
today.
Yeah.
Author, co author, coach, consultant, business owner, human resources professional, faith based leader. Thank you so much for your words today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Dr. O, and I look forward to us continuing to sharpen each other's minds.
That's great. So, thank you everybody for coming to the podcast. Um, Stepping up to leadership through my consulting company, HRC Vision. If there's any way that I can assist you in taking your next step, I'm happy to. If you also would like to be connected to Maxine Johnson, we're happy to do that as well. So, again, thank you very much for attending today and the best to everyone.
You've been tuning into Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing the show with others.